Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or listening through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever discovered in my over 47 years of doing therapy. These tools are gratefully available absolutely free through to the tireless efforts of Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the link in the upper left-hand corner of most pages that says Start Here, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. You can also download the actual worksheet itself, a PDF file. Click on it, download it, copy it, print it off, use it as often as you'd like. That tool is a tool I've been using to great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and relationships, manage my emotional states, and effectively turn any negative emotional state I have into part of the infallible guidance system that we've all been gifted. And if that sounds like anything that might be of benefit to you, it's available absolutely free at whyagain.org. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one where people have been stepped through that worksheet process. We also have discussions of a variety of other tools that Michael and Jeannie make available. And you can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness and get access to a completely free and private app that contains that worksheet process, an abbreviated version of that process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we hope people do that soon and often. Go to the website, click download, read, try, use, because then you'll generate thoughts, comments, and questions, and we're here to entertain those 5 days a week, 2 hours a day in our current format. And if you have one of those questions, you can give us a call at 563-999-3581 and press 1. Alternatively, you can send us an email. You can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org, and or you can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. We've also made the commitment to go through the Course in Miracles lessons this year, and today is the 166th day of the year, and so these workbook lessons, one for each day, land us with the lesson that says, I am entrusted with the gifts of God. And the commentary for today's lesson is quite long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. It has a total of 15 paragraphs. But the essence of it is, all things are given you. The Creator's trust in you is limitless. Creator knows its offspring, and it gives without exception, holding nothing back that can contribute to your happiness. And yet, unless your will is one with the Creator's gifts are not received. But what would make you think there is something other than the Creator's will? Here is the paradox that underlies the making of the world that you see. The world that you see is not the will of the Creator, and so it is not real. Yet those who think it real must still believe there is another will and one that leads to opposite effects from those. So here's the idea. We've talked at great length about how science has been very, very clear at helping us understand that ways to do things. Whether I'm writing a blog post or having a conversation with my BFF, whether I'm making a smoothie or plans for a European vacation, I either use the resources of door number 1 or door number 2. Door number 1, the drug of choice for many, means using the power of my own resources, making decisions based on limited thoughts within my own head, with what I've learned from my parents, from school, from the news. To summarize, it means using resources of the past. Door number 2, the only other choice, uses resources beyond my limited brain. Door number 2 encourages me to conduct my life in faith, accepting all gifts bestowed by my invisible inner source. In Lesson 166, I am entrusted with the gifts of Source. It says, all gifts are given without exception, with nothing held back. Whether aware or not, these gifts are reliable, constant, and far. The polio she'd had as a child left her with 2 withered limbs. And, well, she was hard-pressed to find anything she really liked about her physical body. 3 times a day, she rolled her wheelchair to the mirror and sat in that. He was flying back home, and his wife was supposed to pick him up at the airport, and she didn't pick him up. And the end result was Dr. Mate pouted for 3 days with his wife of 30, 40-some years. And here's a very bright guy, and he's studied some of the best philosophical and psychological techniques ever. But putting them into practice in his life moment to moment is still a challenge.
Yeah.
So I caution you against that, putting people on the pedestal like that. Go ahead.
Well, Dietrich Volzak, earlier in the talk, and I want to go back and hear it unless you remember it too, he said something like that. He said, I'm still challenged, or I'm not there all the time. Do you remember what he said? It was very early on, and I didn't go back to listen.
Well, it's essentially the same message. We should mention for people before we completely run out of time that what you're talking about is a podcast that's available absolutely free. It's at journeysdream.org/podcast, and it's available. It's the On Your Mind podcast with Journeys Dream. And Dietrich Volzak was kind enough to let us interview him for that.
It's really good. I copied the link, Ellen, and I'm going to send it to our Zoom group, anybody who wants to listen before tomorrow or at any time. I think it's just so delicious.
I just started listening to a talk of his that's on his website. Explains his whole process. I haven't gotten very far into that, but I'm finding that quite good as well.
And we present it here because it's essentially exactly, and it says, if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, it says, the world that you see is not creator-created. How can you say that? Well, because your eyes only see a very limited amount of the light spectrum. We call it the visible spectrum. Right? But what's visible about it? To whom is it visible? Why do we have to use the word visible? Because the spectrum of energy that we call light is far broader than what our eyes as antennas can register and interpret. So we don't even, just take one thing. We don't even see everything there is to be seen, even when our eyes are wide open and we're not being blocked by any kind of emotional disturbance. We just don't physically have the capability to see what's there, what we're swimming in. We don't see ultraviolet, we don't see infrared, we don't see the X-rays and microwaves and other energies that we're swimming in. We don't see Indra's web. We don't see the Planck's constant energy that connects all things. So that's just on one level, just one level of our senses. We don't hear everything that is there. Whales communicate, elephants communicate, dogs hear things that we don't hear. It just doesn't register in our antenna called the ear. It goes on. You know, here we have people that are been affected by one of the recent viruses, and they lose their sense of smell and their sense of hearing. But we already know that dogs and wolves and all kinds of other animals register things in their olfactory senses that we don't register at all. So, you know, this isn't pie-in-the-sky philosophical woo-woo stuff when the Course in Miracles says the world you see is not the world that the Creator created. We're only seeing a tiny bit of it. And then we have people like Anil Seth and other people who are studying perception, and we realize that not only do we only register a tiny bit of what's there to be registered in terms of the physical energies, but we are making up in our brain our best guess of what is actually out there based on our past history and our emotions and traumas and hopes and fears and intellectual capacities, but basically from our past experiences. And every one of us is, quote, hallucinating whatever sights or sounds and the attendant meanings of those sights and sounds that register in our brains. That maybe 20% of what goes into the input that goes into any image I see is coming from the light waves that stimulate the optic nerve. And then 80% of it is coming from my past experiences and my belief system and my trauma structures. So we are taught to think of ourselves as physical and nothing else. I was doing some work reading a book. I'm not yet ready to recommend the book, but in one of the sections it's talking about, let's try to understand the relationship between body and mind, and consequently the meaning of the body's ills in relation to the soul's bruises. To do that, we must enlarge the view we have of the human being and life itself. If we remain stuck in the materialistic concept of man as machine, with its notion of the body as a series of independent, interchangeable parts, much like a car, then the subtle energy connections that I'm about to outline here are going to seem like magical thinking. Yet this is precisely the point, that the physical manifestations and symptoms of illness that we experience point to something deeper that lies within us. A simple mechanical observation cannot reveal the true source of pain and illness because its view is too much glued to the symptoms. The field of observation is limited in terms of both time and space, and this prevents us from going to the real cause of our problems, which the mechanistic view explains in terms of fate in case of accidents or interaction with external elements in the form of viruses or microbes or food or the environment. So by expanding our view and observing the human being as a whole, both physically and temporally, we can begin to connect the dots, so to speak. This is what religion, from the Latin religare, meaning to connect or to link, was intended to do by assigning to humans a real dimension that is first and foremost spiritual. By taking this approach, we can begin to understand humanity's mission and consequently the reasons for dis-ease. So if we stay in the mechanistic view, one of the things that is I've seen this in a number of different sources, and people talk about how, if our current medical model is true and we are just physical, then we ought to be able to, for example, this is easier to visualize than a human. In a human, we ought to be able to take off somebody's arms and take off their legs and take out their liver and take out their kidney and take out their heart and their lungs and take out their brain and just set them aside and then reassemble them and the person get up and walk away. And we know that doesn't work. Now, medical science keeps saying, yes, we get closer because now we can take the heart out and keep it hooked up to machines and keep it beating and then, put somebody else's heart in, blah, blah, blah. The fact of the matter is there are serious limits to the mechanistic, materialistic view of the human. And Evan Alexander is one who studied the brain, and he studied neurology, and he was convinced by the current mode of science that consciousness is simply the byproduct of random neural firings, that there's nothing to us except the physical. And then he had a medical situation develop in which his brain was encased in pus and infection, and everything that we can register with our physical machines and scans and it was telling all the experts his brain is dead. And they were keeping him alive on life support, and they had him in a coma, and they were pumping all of these antibiotics in. And after days, they finally said to his family, well, we could keep giving him this stuff, but even if he comes back now, his brain has been offline for so long that he'll just be a vegetable. He'll never have any intellectual capacity because that whole part of his brain has been dead and encased in infection and been, damaged. And the end of the story is that he did come back. And he did have, after 7 or 8 days, whatever it was, an extraordinary story to tell, which included awareness that nothing in the physical realm can account for. Awareness of things that happened in his own personal experience, whether you want to call it spiritual or not. Awareness of things that was happening physically around him in the hospital, even outside of the room that his body was lying in. Conversations that took place, people that visited, that he could have no logical way to have access to if you believed that we're nothing but the physical. So, the idea is hard science demonstrates to us that we are not just physical beings, and yet most of us rely almost exclusively on a medical model that only accounts for our physicality. And then we wonder why things go wrong. So there's a story that I was relaying a week or 2 or 3 ago of a gentleman who was in the sports field, and he progressed to the point where he moved to Florida to become the president of the Florida hockey team, professional hockey team. And then when he got there and started the job, it wasn't long before he had this health crisis. And he couldn't function, and he couldn't sleep, and he couldn't concentrate, and all these things were going wrong. And they did because he had lots of money. He was, high up in our society in terms of financial accomplishments, etc. And he had this high-paying job as president of this big money hockey league team. And they couldn't find anything. They did all the tests they could, and finally they said, okay, here's the problem. This is only emotional. So he eventually ended up in the office of a psychiatrist, and if I remember the story correctly, after his first visit with a psychiatrist, he left with 5 medications. After, I believe it was a period of 3 years, he had been to one doctor after another, and been through, I think they said, 50 different medications they had tried him on, and they finally said to him, your last-ditch effort, the last possible chance we have to help you is transcranial magnetic stimulation, very powerful magnets close to the brain to stimulate, and if that doesn't work, then convulsive shock therapy, electroshock therapy, which they don't really call it convulsive shock therapy anymore because they've tempered it with computers. It used to be that they would shock people with car batteries and other strong electrical devices, and their bodies would go into convulsions so strong that they would actually snap, bones would break. So they learned to give them, tranquilizers and put their body to sleep first, and muscle relaxers and things, and then they would shock the body. But it's much more subtle, but it's still, they were telling him that his last hope was to have strong electrical stimulations run through his brain. And if that didn't work, he's a hopeless case. It wasn't until after all of that happened that he ended up in the office of an integrative therapist. And the therapist was the first person that said to him, I'd like to teach you to breathe differently and relax your body, and I'd like to ask you what's been going on in your life. What are the stresses in your life? No one, according to his report, all those medications were given, all those medical tests were given, and nobody asked him, what's been going on in your life? What are your stresses? What are your hopes and fears? What are your biggest traumas? How was your life growing up? What are you feeling about pressure on yourself to succeed, or feeling yourself as a failure, or whatever? Not once, according to his report, had anybody asked him about any of those issues until after they exhausted everything they could think of physically in the test realm and every medication they have for psychiatric problems. And this woman said, well, here's this 3-day breathing technique training I want you to go to. It was so powerful and effective for him, I believe that he said he stayed with it for 30 days. And then he got introduced to another integrative treatment specialist, and he got his life back. And he got his life back so fully that he decided he was going to make a difference. And he created samehereglobal.org. What saved him, what brought his life back, was thinking about his mental and emotional energy and dynamics, his spirituality, not just thinking of his body as a car he's driving around in, as a physical device. And so that's what we're after in this work, to understand that I can't keep operating from core negative beliefs, faulty cause and effect relationships, the false cause and effect relationships that my culture teaches me. You made me angry. You hurt my feelings. That's a natural disaster. There is no such thing as a natural disaster. There's just the movement of nature. And then we as humans label it good or bad. Oh, isn't that a great torrential rain? Isn't that a godsend that it's finally raining here in Illinois, where we're having the longest drought, or biggest drought we've had since 2012? And then if we get a big rainfall, we say, oh, isn't that magnificent? No, it's just rain. Isn't this drought horrible? No, it's just a drought. It doesn't become good or bad, right or wrong, up or down, until a human mind judges it. So, the idea of understanding that when I judge something as bad, that creates a tension in me, and that literally creates the impact on me, not the outside event, but my interpretation of it. If I don't learn the truth of that, the capital T truth of how I'm creating my experience of life in each new present moment with the focus I choose for my conscious awareness, then I am, as Michael Ryce would say, unconsciously creating. Because whatever I focus my attention on, I'm going to get more of. Whatever interpretations I place on life events, that's the impact it's going to have on me. Neutral, good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. If I am not taught this, I am actively participating in something without my awareness, and I'm creating consequences that I'm unaware of, and then I attribute cause and effect relationships most often to correlational relationships. If we are not taught about how we create false, arbitrary cause and effect relationships, if we are not taught about how our choice of interpretation of life events is the very thing that creates the impact upon us, then we do not have the capacity to change it. So that's my thoughts for today, and we have somebody with a hand up and a switchboard that's not responding quickly, but I believe this is Ellen.
Yes, it is. Hi, Dr. Tim.
Hello, Ellen. How can we support you today?
Well, actually, I just wanted to chime in with you because what you were talking about is exactly like a deeper realization I had the other morning over the weekend. And it kind of started with, and it's really just like a deeper understanding of equality. And it kind of started with me when I was reading Byron Katie's book, 1,000 Names for Joy, and in one of her stories, she was talking about how due to her eye condition, she wasn't seeing very well, and therefore it was much easier for her to, trip over things and fall down. And she wrote that, in her life, in her view, that falling down is equal to not falling down, and that getting up after falling down is equal to not being able to get up. And when I read that, I thought, wow, it sounded so radical. But yet, I saw how, if those things are equal, if every experience is equal, no matter what the outcome is, then how would you ever get pulled out of peace? And so I could see how, yes, if that is the way that she's living her life, everything is joy. So it kind of started with that, and then I heard, I was listening to an interview with Brother Jacobson.
Let me just interrupt. Before you leave that point, let me just interrupt and do what my brain, I'll share out loud what my brain just did. If you live your life that way, it doesn't mean everything is joy. This is just what my brain did. What it means is everything is neutral, and you're free to choose joy or anger or bitterness or resentment, etc.
Sure. Yep. That's
and
it.
I'm just sharing that's what my brain did. Said, no, wait, not everything is joy in this woman's life, and she doesn't even pretend that, right? But she's clearer and clearer the more she works at it. Of course, she had one of those shocking, deep revelations. She woke up and everything had changed for her. But I think the message, especially for those of us who haven't had that, is to wake up and realize not that everything is joy, but everything is neutral, and we get to choose the joyful response, the bitter, hurt response, the judgmental response, and that's what's going to create our experience of life. Hold on to your second point before you make it. I was just also thinking last night. I got home after a long day of work, and I went to get some, I had a container of, whatever they call that, fried rice. And I'm tired. It's a long day at work. I open the refrigerator, and I open it to make sure that, it's what I think it is, and the whole container drops out of my hand and spills on the floor. And I just started laughing, just good-natured laughing. I have this set of hands that work a certain way, and here it is, I'm tired, and I just, so 5 or 10 years ago, or 15 or 20 certainly, what would have erupted out of me would have been swear words and red-faced and, upset. And last night, what erupted out of me, there was no effort intended. It just erupted out of me, just laughter.
Yeah.
And the end result is the same either way, right? I still have to do something to clean up the stuff on the floor. I'm either going to be able to eat the stuff that didn't fall out of the container or have to throw it all away, whatever. That doesn't change anything. But in the moment, I have the choice, once I am, alerted to this, and I've had a lot of times over the years since learning Michael's work probably 17 or 18 years ago, where I've been triggered and had to do some EFT tapping and breathing and goal canceling and find out, what's this negative belief I'm holding about myself and dismantle it, before I got to the point where when I drop the food I want to eat at the end of a long day, I erupt in laughter instead of rage. But the point is still there. It's an option. The event of the food dropping to the floor didn't cause the rage in me before, and it's not causing the laughter in me now. It's the interpretation I place on it. It's the understanding of the flow. So that was the point I wanted to make. What was your second point?
Yes, and I agree. So I was sitting with that and thinking, wow, like if I could really embrace everything that appears to be a bad experience, and just and see it that it's equal to the opposite experience. And so anyway, I had been sitting with that for a while, and then I heard Leonard Jacobson say, I think it was, it must have been Saturday because it was Sunday morning that all this started deepening in me. I heard him say that in order to transcend the world of duality, you have to bring it into perfect balance. Everything is equal. And so that really struck a chord with me because I had been thinking about this concept of equality and hadn't really related it to a state of perfect balance. But then he said that, and it was like, oh, yeah. And I just saw how, exactly what you just said, the situation itself, and this relates to not only every person and everything, of course, being equal, but every experience. Nothing is, and this, I always, whenever I think about these things, I always notice these principles that whether you're in, actuality, or whether you're in duality, the world of illusions, the same principles hold. The same principles hold. So I was looking at this principle of equality. And, of course, in a state of unity, there's perfect equality. But also that exists in the world of illusions. But we can choose to not see that. And that's the only time we suffer. We can choose to say, no, this is better or worse than that. And it's if it's a world of illusions, how can one illusion be better or worse than another illusion? I mean, it seems crazy, like that I didn't really get this before.
Right, but the absolute essence of it is that there is no difference, and yet I create the impact on me and the experience of it as either good or bad, right or wrong, as I choose my interpretation of it.
Right. So I had because what really struck me, what I just like got and I wrote down was everything is equal. This includes life and death. Because I'd had the experience of a few days before that, where I had these little, whenever I pull a head of romaine out of my garden, I always like to soak it in the sink, and usually like little earwigs crawl out of it, and I stand there and wait for them and rescue them. But sometimes, I find some in the bowl afterwards, and they're just laying there lifeless. And anyway, so that, that happened, but I was like, I was busy, too busy to like drain the sink and clean it out, so I like left it for a while. Came back about an hour later, and I was like, okay, I'm going to pull out these little bodies, scoop them out before I drain the water. And the first one I scooped out immediately came to life. And I was like, oh my God, like he was in there for like an hour and a half. But like I thought, like I felt so happy, but I thought at the time that that's why I was so happy. And then I thought, oh, well, maybe the other ones will come to life too. So I went to scoop the other ones out, and they did not, all right? So that's what really struck me is like what I really got was those outcomes were equal.
My awareness of my thought process, canceling a goal, asking to be shown something else would be pointless, because if the truth of it is when a strong wind takes down a tree on my property, that's a tragedy, then nothing about doing a reality management worksheet or changing my perspective on it would have any impact on my life. It would be simply the outside event having the impact. So That's it. You're there, and at one level you're observing at a deeper level of truth the actual mechanism that gives any power to the reality management worksheet and the other tools that Dr. Michael Jeannie Ryce offer at whyagain.org, WHYAGAIN.org. And they're absolutely free. Free for download.
Yes, go ahead.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So right after like I had all these wonderful realizations, I went downstairs and I saw a big pile of vomit on the rug, and I just watched how my mind wanted to say, oh, now you got to clean that up, and then the next thought was, oh, I wonder if one of the cats is sick, and I looked at that and I said, wow. And I knew that this situation, this pile of vomit on the rug, is absolutely meaningless. And here is my mind trying to put meaning onto it, meaning that would pull me out of peace. And it's like, no way. And I would not allow that. And, I just saw the deception in how my mind just wants to interpret, and it was easy in that moment because I just had all that realization how everything is equal, and it's me choosing. That's how I was, like, interpreting, like, the Course in Miracles talking about seeing through the eyes of Christ. I choose how I want to look on something. I choose that. And if I choose that everything is good, every experience is a good experience, because that's how it actually is. Only in the world of illusions can something appear to be good or bad. So knowing that,
And in this realm, what we're being called to do with the Course in Miracles lessons and the Michael Ryce work is to catch ourselves when we're making those judgments and cancel them. And asking to be shown how to look at it, how to interpret it, how to be a blessing in that moment, these various ways. How do I respond without the judgment that labels one thing good and another bad? That opens up an extraordinarily vast, beyond words, potential for living that many people who step into the use of these tools are finding.
Yeah, it's like that door number 2 that when you read the Pam Grout.
Pam Grout talks about, yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And, so I just chose to see it as totally meaningless, and there's no cause for concern, number 1, that one of my cats is ill. There's no cause for concern. There's no cause for me to be upset because now I have to clean this up. There's absolutely no cause for that at all unless I choose to create it in my own mind. So, and it really opened my eyes to, like, how I judge everything. Like, when I thought of judgment, I thought of, like, judging myself or judging other people. I wasn't recognizing how I was judging, like, every happening, like, and putting that judgment on it. So yeah, it's and then after all that, then I read my lesson for the day, and it was talking about righting the balance and we will not judge today, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is just tying right in with everything I just experienced, So, and then you started talking about it today, so it was like, okay, I gotta put my 2 cents worth in there because. Yeah, I really it changes everything.
Yeah, and it keeps changing so that we don't have to be, what's the most common word we have thrown around, we don't have to be a victim of it. We get to realize that there's an entirely, and most people have never even questioned this. Most people have never even been brought to this level of awareness where you can question, is there a benefit or a negative cost to me when I judge things? What would it be like if I went through my life and I refused to judge? Now, this is different from discerning, right? So the discerning lets me understand that there's a difference between a clean carpet and a carpet with vomit on it. So it's not like I ignore the vomit. It's not like I ignore the food that I spilled on the floor. I don't ignore it, but there's a difference between having the ability to see it and perceive it and judging it as good or bad, right or wrong.
Exactly.
So I'm glad you called with your input. And I wonder if there's something else, another aspect of it, or another comment or question you have for us today.
I don't think so. Yeah, no, that was it. I just, hearing you talk about the exact thing that I was really recognizing was, again, it's just another alignment, that seems to happen more and more and more. The more you
the use of the tools has
the deception.
the use of these tools opens up that level of perception. Right? I mean, I start to see things and potentials for things that I never saw before. When I learn to question instead of operating from my past or insisting on answers, as Rilke would call us to, learning to live in the question rather than demanding the answer. When I get into that habit pattern, life changes fairly dramatically. And learning to live in the question is an extraordinarily powerful difference from demanding answers or trying to know everything or thinking I know something when, basically my senses are only picking up a fraction of the physical realm that's there. Somebody that we know put a hand up here in our last 7 minutes. Susan, is that you?
It is. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Susan.
Good talk, everybody. Dr. Tim, I listened, and I could only listen to half because your show started, and I didn't want to miss it, to your newest podcast with Diedrich Wolzak, and it is so good, even though I'm only halfway through. It's so good, and it fits with all you've been talking about especially about how he takes full responsibility, which you're talking about, full responsibility for his experience, even to the point where you and he sort of took a fork in the road and then you came around, where you said, I wonder if we could say, though, that the Holocaust wasn't chosen by this person, but their reaction to it is a choice. And he said, I agree with you totally, but ultimately it's the whole shebang. We actually dreamed that dream, including that's our creation. And the idea, he said, this depth of knowledge of our responsibility is very freeing. I'm not there yet, but I love that he said that. And then hitching that to yesterday's lesson, where I've paraphrased, my mind affirms a thought of God rather than not my mind deny the thought of God. My mind affirms the thought of God, and it says you don't have to be certain. You just have to accept and desire, or I put it in the other order, desire and accept the truth of this, which I thought was talk about a freeing thought. Just desire and accept it and let the work be done somehow, despite reservations or doubts or whatever, I feel as if I'm a person with one foot on one side of a fence and one foot on the other. It sounds as if Ellen's feet are all on one side for the most part, and I want to come over there. But anyway,
well, remember, when it sounds like that to you, Susan, remember that's in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not, and like when I dropped the food last night, it's not like nothing happens in my life gets an angry response anymore. It's not like every time I stub a toe or, things don't go the way I want that I just chuckle and laugh it off. But in the moments where things are flowing, that's a possibility. And having exposure to that moment where my eyes are open and I'm not rushing to judgment, I've developed the thought pattern of questioning and laughing at life and myself. When that pattern takes over, it demonstrates to me that the outside event isn't causing the response. But it's not. Right. It's not that everyone all the time responds, or anybody all the time responds in that way. I think I was telling the story about Dr. Gabor Mate, and he did the same process as the reality management worksheet that's available absolutely free at whyagain.org. And hours of shows, special shows curated by Jeannie Ryce that will help you step through the use of the reality management worksheet. And and if you go to mindshiftersacademy.org on the educational materials page, there's a forgiveness worksheet pattern that if you add the regular worksheet and that forgiveness pattern, you get almost exactly Diedrich Wolzak's 6-step choose again forgiveness process. It is, and it's not a coincidence because both Dr. Michael Ryce and Diedrich Wolzak studied and learned and practiced what was taught in the Course in Miracles, and that's what's informing both of these pieces of work.
So exciting.
Yeah, and he mentioned someone else in the beginning of that video that he learned from, and he said that person actually took A Course in Miracles and put it into more of a layman's terms, but I don't remember that person's name. And this was like 40 years ago, he said. Anyway.
Well, thank you both for your comments, calls, and questions. I will mute you so we can do our shift change, as it were. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of this stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Welcome, Jeannie Ryce.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a great show.
Thanks.